Hello and welcome to the Ramsgate International Film and Television Festival. I'm joined today by Alexander Milo Bischof, the writer and director of one of this year's feature submissions, the tortured romance drama Trouble Will Find Us. Hi, Alexander.
Hi, Ethan.
So the film stars Ruth Kearney and Dylan Edwards as Tess and Henry, the central couple who are faced with the challenge of tackling the modern world, who find their relationships heavily strained in the process. So I guess we can just get started. My first question in terms of the film is, how do you go about casting a movie like this? Because obviously the performances are very central and the chemistry between the two leads is really important. Did you find it at all a challenge to find that in a lead pair of actors?
Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, chemistry is a thing that unless you sort of you get to that stage of the day of the first day of shoot, that it's difficult to kind of like gauge that. And because of it being a very independent film, low budget, there was not, we didn't really have any rehearsal period. But it was just important for me to kind of like to get an idea of what the actors are like, sort of as real people, really, So it wasn't, we didn't go down the route of a traditional audition. So it was more sort of kind of seeing what they're like, and kind of, so we I met Ruth and Dylan, and we just had a chat, kind of, rather than going through lines, and kind of like trying to be in character and see what they're like, and that's something that I just wanted to sort of achieve anyway with the film, is get that sort of like that naturalistic feel of the two characters, so kind of for everyone to be able to sort of associate with them in a way, and connect. And so in that sense, it was it was great. I mean, as soon as I met the two of them, and sort of at that stage I would have known about their kind of body of work as well, it was just immediately clear that kind of Ruth was the perfect person to play the part of Tess, and Dylan, the part of Henry.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the kind of, you mentioned the naturalism, because it really does feel like personality and the more naturalistic performances really are like kind of the focus, I found, at least, of the film. So it's interesting that you kind of had that approach. And speaking of naturalism, when a story like this is so grounded or kind of tackles more like realistic or personal themes, um, things like aging, social issues, and conformity, a lot of people kind of might think that the story kind of comes across as autobiographical, or might think about how it could be potentially autobiographical. Uh, you are the writer and director of the film, so what did you find that this film was kind of partially inspired by your life, or was it something where you were kind of separated from a more observing as an outsider when you were creating it?
I mean, I think there's definitely always a little bit of autobiography within my work. I mean, I just don't think you can kind of like avoid that, in any way. I mean, in this sense, I guess it is sort of, it is perhaps a struggle of the artist, to kind of like getting that break, which might have or definitely has parallels to my own life. But other than that, I kind of really wanted to explore the kind of the juxtaposition of kind of like a more traditional career, like Tessa's, and a more sort of like creative life, the one of Henry's, and kind of like see how the two can, kind of like cohabitate in a way, but also kind of like how they obviously create conflict down the line, and explore that.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's definitely the kind of one of the main tensions you see kind of recurring throughout the film. Definitely. So in terms of the form or the kind of narrative structure of the film, what kind of inspired your decision to take this kind of long-term relationship and break it up into these kind of segments that are, aesthetically are quite striking, almost like vignettes, I think, is the kind of end result. Was there like a kind of inspiration, or what kind of motivated that decision?
Um, I mean, I guess fundamentally, it's just the fact that I love those kind of films, using that technique, whether it's like Joanna Hogg, like Ruben Östlund, Michael Haneke, that kind of stuff, where it just kind of, it allows you to observe, what's happening from the outside in. And I love the tension that creates as well, rather than cutting around bits all the time, and going for that really obvious close up, for instance, right, that you get so often. But really it was more from a production angle, where kind of being like during pre-production, I was watching a lot of Joanna's first movies, like Unrelated, or Archipelago, and Ruben's Involuntary and Play. And I just kind of like realized that it's a pretty neat way to make an independent feature film, because it allows you to work with a very tight schedule, kind of like you don't have huge shot lists, right, that you have to deal with. And I think Joanna's first film, I think that was shot, I think the budget was around 150K or something. So it just made sense to follow that approach, and be a lot freer in terms of making a film. And then it made sense as well, with a story too, kind of like just showing, these people's lives, kind of that relationship, really from sort of a voyeuristic lens, and kind of just letting the two play out, kind of play out a scene, play out their life, and together, and sort of watch them from the outside in.
No, yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the kind of reviews of kind of that I've read, at least, have pointed out, it creates a very, like you said, voyeuristic or fly on the wall kind of perspective, which creates a really interesting kind of dichotomy, I guess, in terms of watching and then seeing these characters. So yeah, well, speaking of the kind of vignettes, it's almost kind of each shot or each sequence is defined by a very specific kind of camera angle or static shot. Then they're always quite striking and quite memorable. Was there any kind of specific thing that you were trying to achieve with this approach, with this kind of framed, uniquely framed vignettes kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was clear from the very beginning that we just wanted to make every single shot as aesthetically pleasing as possible. I mean, first of all, as sort of the contrast of the perfection against the imperfection of a relationship, or of us human beings, and also just something as well, a tool to kind of draw the audience in as well, right? So kind of like depending on what that particular scene is, to still offer them something that is visually pleasing, on the eye, and often misleading as well, which is great. So kind of you set the audience up in a particular scene, giving them this beautifully aesthetic shot and camera angle, and then kind of letting the actors really do their own thing, and kind of like taking that particular scene or specific scene to wherever it goes.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the one that stood out to me was probably when Tess is sat in the car and you only really see her face framed in the rearview mirror. And yeah, no, it leaves an impression at the end of the day, and it's that's exactly what you want, I suppose. Yeah. Cool. Well, in regards to the film's style, the kind of composition, the very kind of precise and measured use of the camera, there's this kind of disconnect almost, or it might feel like it, with the precision of the camera, but the kind of naturalism of the script and the characters. And I was wondering, was that their performances and their kind of delivery, was that something also that was very measured and precise, or was that something you kind of allowed the actors to kind of take in a more improvisational or kind of more personal direction without so much oversight?
Yeah, it was a bit of both, definitely. I mean, there's quite a bit of improvisation in the film, and I think kind of the outset really was, the foundation was just there were a few lines of, I mean, there was a script, but it was only 65 pages or so long, and it was really just about, I just wanted whether a certain line that had to be said in or mentioned in a particular way, and kind of like just the subject matter of the conversation, for instance, and where that particular conversation of that scene would lead to. But other than that, some of the scenes, they were before the edit up to 10 minutes long. So if you take, for instance, the scene in the bookshop with Henry and his dad, that was close to 10 minutes long. So it was kind of like, I just let them do their own thing, really, and kind of and really be themselves in a way, and kind of like almost like experimenting as well where it could go, in that sense. So there would be there would definitely be a beginning, you know, and an end. But whatever sort of like was going on in between, it was pretty free. I mean, some scenes were more scripted than others, and some of them were pretty free flow. For instance, yeah, the scene when they're on having breakfast, eating the cereal on the pommel horse. That's pretty much, apart from a few lines, pretty much improvised.
Okay, cool. And yeah, speaking of that scene with the dad character, I quite liked his kind of appearance. I thought that actor did a really good job, kind of, and they bring something almost quite different to the film. He had quite a bit.
Do you feel? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, nice one. So in terms of influence, are there any? I know you mentioned a few directors or a few creators before. Are there any key kind of films or works that inspired the aesthetic or the narrative of the film? Because they do feel very kind of inspired in that sense, especially the aesthetic that we were talking about before.
Aesthetically, so definitely, like I said, Joanna Hogg films, Ruben Östlund films, Michael Haneke is something that I just really always really loved. You know, their films, especially Haneke, is probably one of my favorite directors in terms of, you know, how he gets these everyday characters into situations where obviously his films are you know, are just true perfection in a way, right? Where every single detail is thought through. So there is no free flow per se. You know, like his script is pretty much set. I think I'm pretty sure it's set in stone. But other than that, I guess you could take sort of dialogue wise. You can take, like, you know, Shane Meadows, you know, is another director who I admire, and it's got that sort of like the organic kind of like a way of dialogue and the characters, how they converse with one another. And you know, Ken Loach, for instance, it's just kind of like where you're in an environment where you just take real people, put them in real situation, give them, you know, real dialogue to say, which is just something that doesn't, you know, happens quite rarely, I think, and especially with relationship films, where you just go, well, I personally at least like struggle sometimes to connect with the characters because it just isn't the way, you know, one would, or I would speak anyway in a situation like that. And it was just important to kind of to ground the characters to a level where just, yeah, the audience is able to connect with them and their lives.
Okay, yeah, nice one. Yeah, I think yeah, no, it definitely does help to kind of look at these more naturalistic things when you're trying to interpret kind of films of this kind of more grounded nature. And yeah, no, I definitely think it pays off in the final product, I think. Brilliant. Thank you very much for answering some of the questions I've had. So people can, yeah, check out your film, Trouble Will Find Us. We'll be joined with Alexander Milo Bischof. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on the Q&A. Thank you very much.